925, Big 550, KTRS. Tonight at Maryville University, our guest will be signing his new book. He's a New York Times best-selling author. The book he wrote, Escape from Camp 14, which was an extraordinary look at a North Korean man who was born into a concentration camp. His next book, The Great Leader and the Fighter Pilot. Tell me about this fighter pilot.
Well, the fighter pilot was a young man living in North Korea in the 1940s when he went to see his great leader, Kim Il-sung, and he saw him speak, and he decided he had to get the hell out of North Korea somehow. He was 16 years old at the time. His father was dead. His family was poor. He didn't know what to do, so he decided to become an actor. He pretended to love his great leader, and he joined the Naval Academy, the North Korean Naval Academy, and then he volunteered to join the Air Force, and he became the youngest fighter pilot in the North Korean Air Force. What he was searching for was an escape module. He thought he might steal a patrol boat if he was in the Navy, but then they gave him a MiG to learn how to fly, and the Korean War broke out. He thought about escaping many times while flying missions to fight the Americans in all-jet air wars, dogfights over North Korea, but he figured the Americans would just shoot him down if he went to South Korea. So he waited until 7 weeks after the war was over. He went up on a combat readiness mission by himself, not flying in formation, for the first time in his career. And this escape that he'd been planning for 7 years, he executed in 17 minutes. He flew to South Korea at 600 miles an hour. And what was his great good luck is that morning, the Americans at Gimpo Air Force Base, a U.S. Air Force base with lots of fighter jets, they turned off their radar that morning, just by happenstance. So this MiG, which was, for the Americans, the most coveted and most fearsome fighter jet.
Wasn't there a reward for somebody who could find one?
Yes, there was, but No Kam-suk didn't know. He just wanted out of North Korea. So he lands his MiG, and the first they know that he's coming is he's on the ground shouting "motor car, motor car," which were the only two words of English he knew at the time. And then he was surrounded by Americans, and soon they all kept saying, "You're a rich man now, aren't you?" And asking him how many cars he would buy, and he didn't know what they were talking about. And it turns out that 6 months before his escape, the high command for the Far East had offered a reward of $100,000 American cash. It was called Operation Moolah, which is a slang word from the 1950s. But he didn't know about it, and this is now worth about $1 million in U.S. currency. So he...
What year is this?
This is in 1953.
1953, okay.
The year the Korean War ended.
Right.
So he landed, he's told about Operation Moolah and the Moolah, and he says, well, I didn't come for the money, but I'll take it. That same evening in Boston, the President of the United States is out shaking hands in Boston, and he learns that that his White House has agreed to make this payment of $100,000. And Dwight Eisenhower sat down and dictated a letter that said, you know, we should not be giving taxpayer money to an airplane thief. Let's find a way to pressure this young man not to take the money. The memo was written, it was given to his staff, it was kept secret for a long time. And they did. They pressured him. The CIA leaned on him repeatedly to say that he didn't want the money.
Right.
In fact, he agreed to go on a press conference and tell the world that he was more interested in freedom than in money. But finally, pesky reporters in Tokyo kept saying, where's the moolah and where's the moolah man? And the Americans decided that it would look bad, it would look cheap, not to give the guy the money. So they finally agreed to give it to him, but in a trust, so that in Eisenhower's words, he wouldn't spend the money on wine, women, and song. And the trust was pretty restrictive. He didn't get full access to the money for 20 years.
Okay.
In the meantime, No Kam-suk came to the United States.
And opened up a software company.
Well, he had an extraordinarily successful career in the United States.
Of course he did.
He came here, he was enrolled in the University of Delaware by the CIA, who took him to the registrar's office.
Right.
And he became an aeronautical engineer, learned English. He's a very intelligent man, as most fighter pilots are, and he ended up working for Boeing, for all the major aerospace companies in the United States. And while he was learning how to be an excellent aeronautical engineer, he also learned how to manage his money. So by the time he had full access to the Moolah, he was a pretty good investor. And he never spent the Moolah at all.
But at some point, he got access to it.
He got access to it. He invested it in, in Intel and in Apple. And now he is truly a wealthy man.
And he calls you up one day and says, "Do you know who I am?"
He calls me up and says, "You should know who I am if you think you know anything about North Korea."
Where does he live now?
He lives in Daytona Beach.
Yeah.
He's 83. He sells and buys stock regularly.
Married, kids, grandkids?
He has a grown family.
Yeah. The great leader and the fighter pilot, the true story of the tyrant who created North Korea and the young lieutenant who stole his way to freedom. So, Blaine Harden tonight, 7:30, Maryville University for a book signing and a book reading. This should be a book.
That's what I thought.
So, the story is told through the fighter pilot's eyes, but also you were able to tell the North Korea story as well.
Well, two great things happened for writing books about this event is that No Kum Suk's when he landed with his MiG, the Americans were incredibly excited. It was a 7-column banner headline at the top of the front page that day. So
wow.
It was a really huge story. So the Americans took him and did a interrogation that lasted for 7 months. 6 hours a day, 5 days a week for 7 months. And they wrote everything down.
Right.
About 4 months before he called me, they finally declassified his interrogation, which I got my hands on.
Right.
And then in the past 15 years, the conversations between Stalin and Kim Il-sung and Mao have been found in the archives in Moscow and Beijing and excavated by legions of scholars, and that information was all available for this book. So the book contains not only the inner thoughts of the fighter pilot, it has real conversations between Stalin, Mao, and Kim Il-sung as they plotted the Korean War, and then recalibrated as all of a sudden they're fighting against the Americans and the Americans are winning.
How did that ever see the light of day? These scholars said this needs, that's amazing.
One word, Gorbachev.
Really?
The Soviet Union, after it collapsed, Yeltsin, his successor, opened up the archives for the Korean War era. Our friend Putin has since closed those archives, and they're no longer available. But scholars from Russia, America, around the world rushed in and copied all the documents. So you really can see Stalin talking about, let's invade South Korea, let's bleed the United States of treasure and of blood. And it will be a painless exercise for us because we won't have any Soviet troops getting killed. The only people who would be killed, Stalin wrote in one memo, will be Koreans. And while that's unfortunate for the Koreans, it's good for global communism because it weakens the United States.
So they rushed in, they copied, they had no idea what they were copying.
No. These were people who knew exactly what they were doing.
Gotcha.
They'd been studying the war for decades, but they went in search of the actual conversations and found them.
That is one of the most amazing things I've heard. Wow. And so now it's closed. For now.
Yeah, but as far as the Korean War is concerned, it was well excavated.
Right.
Maybe after Putin, there'll be another opening.
The great leader and the fighter pilot, the true story of the tyrant who created North Korea and the young lieutenant who stole his way to freedom. Blaine Harden, New York Times best-selling author. His other book, Escape from Camp 14. If you don't have that, that's a must. This new one, book signing and a book reading, 7 o'clock in Maryville University. You're always welcome here, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You got it. 9:34 here, Big 550 KTRS.